Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here on the map Black Forest with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around, this is promising to be a very interesting match between the forces of Chaos as well as the forces of the Skaven. So going into this match, I actually wanted to try a bunch of silly stuff or a bunch of units that I don't normally use myself, and actually don't see all that often in other players' gameplay either. So I wanted to give them a shot and just try them out. So I did bring a few units. I'll go over them as I describe my composition that I don't believe you see all that often, and definitely not in the configurations you're going to be seeing here. For my lord, I did bring Kolek, and this is definitely not something unusual. Kolek is a very sort of vanilla baseline lord. As far as the chaos is concerned, you will see this in very many builds. He's incredibly powerful for a variety of reasons. He's obviously very tanky. He has 100 armor, crazy missile resistance of 25%, because fear terror is great. Is really mobile. Bonus against large, armor piercing, great melee attack and melee defense. Does have standard die, which is basically standard ground. Lord of the Storm, which is a great little bombardment spell, as well as Star Crusher, which gives him some pretty takes his crazy weapon damage and makes it even crazier. I did bring a Dragon Ogre Shaggoth alongside him, just to provide him with some additional anti-large punch and to counteract enemy large units. For example, Skaven do have a tendency to bring, for example, Plague Monks with on top of the Plague Furnace or Doom Wheels or Rat Ogres, and against these the Dragon Ogre Shaggoths and Kolek can be very potent, so I definitely wanted them to be in here just to give me a little bit of competitive edge there. Then with my front line, I just wanted to go very as wide as I could just to provide coverage for the supporting units. So I did a mix of slightly veteran Chaos Marauders mixed in with some Chaos Warriors. Chaos Warriors with their 100 armor are actually going to be very resilient to the vast majority of the Skaven infantry. They have silver shields, so most of the Skaven shooting will do very little to them. They have very high melee defense at 44, and with 100 armor, Plague Monks, who are a really common pick for Skaven, are going to do very little to the Chaos Warriors. I do have them backed here. The Chaos Marauders are not particularly great, but for their cost, they can definitely slice and dice their way through cheap infantry, and that's really the main reason we're bringing them here. Behind them, we do have them backed by a unit of Aspiring Champions. I find these guys are very important if you bring Kolek as your lord, because Kolek's usually off doing his own thing, and the Aspiring Champions allow you to keep that encouragement aura here in the center and keep your units in the fight as best they can. They also do have magic attacks, which makes them decent, if not amazing, against something like Plague Monks with their physical resist. Out on the very flanks, we do have two units of Forsaken. The Forsaken, of course, I'm hoping to get into the enemy backline. I don't have any cavalry, so these guys are kind of pseudo-cav. Against Skaven, if you have something like Kolek and Dragon Ogre Shaggoth to already shut down an enemy, when you're fighting against Skaven, if you already have these guys to shut down enemy Doom Wheels or Lords, you don't really need extra cavalry. Forsaken are fast enough and nasty enough to really get into the backline and tear through the Skaven very effectively. Obviously, they still have decent armor at 75, monstrous weapon strength at 63. So obviously, that's with Frenzy up, 40 melee attack, and a great charge bonus and all that sort of stuff. These guys are absolutely brutal and disgusting and will destroy Skaven very quickly. Then the main kind of bread and butter unit here, and of course Chaos Warriors are all on uncommon side on their own. This time around, I did back them with two units of Chaos Trolls with armored Chaos Trolls, thinking that I probably wasn't going to see any Storm Vermin, but just in case, I wanted some armor piercing just to deal with more with the Plague Furnaces and to deal with Storm Vermin if it happened to show up, and to deal with those sorts of units. Not really thinking I'd see them, but I didn't actually veteran these guys up, so their leadership is pretty poor. Obviously, buffed by the Aspiring Champions, they will be okay, and they are immune to fear because they do cause fear themselves. In the center, we also do have a unit of Chaos Spawn, and these guys are there to stiffen up the line, provide me with an unbreakable linchpin, and they are a very risky pick, I think. Unlike the armored Chaos Trolls who have monstrous armor at 110, these guys have only 10 armor, so they're very susceptible to shooting, and Skaven have a lot of cheap low armor piercing shooting that they can field, so definitely a bit risky, but at the same time I thought that they could be decent against the squishy units Skaven tend to bring, including Rat Ogres, for example. Now, my opponent actually caught me completely by surprise, doing a strange build of his own, and for his lord he did take Quick Head Taker, which is in of itself not that common. He does have Warp Shard armor, which is a nice little armor debuff. I do believe minus 18. He did come in with Dwarf Gouger. It's a little difficult to get a nice visual here, and we can see the nasty Hellpit Abomination there as well. He did bring Trophy Heads to debuff my lord, and Verminous Valor, of course, and Stand Your Ground, all that sort of stuff. So very potent there. Here in the woods, he does have a He does have one of the casters hidden. He does have a Warlock Engineer. I'm not entirely sure what he brought in the Warlock Engineer. If we look into his magic, he does a Skitter Leap, which allows him to stalk certain units, which is definitely promising to make things a bit interesting. Over here in the flank, my opponent does have a Warp Fire Thrower as well as Skaven Slaves hidden, and he does have another Warp Fire Thrower over here on this flank. This card actually would be surprisingly effective against Chaos Marauders, who have very little armor, and against the Chaos Spawn they could be good too, though obviously the morale debuff is not very useful. In the front line, my opponent does have a bunch of Skaven Slaves backed by Stormvermin, Sword and Shield, which in my opinion is not the best of choices against Chaos. Definitely a little risky, as these guys don't have armor piercing, and Chaos does tend to bring a lot of heavily armored troops in builds that aren't necessarily mine, but definitely I think it's a little risky, but nonetheless pretty cool to see. You don't see Stormvermin very often. They are backed in this situation by a whole cluster of Clan Rat Spears. Two of them are here, and two of them, one over there and one over there. A unit of Death Globe Bombardiers, who with their splash could definitely tear through some of my heavily armored infantry pretty effectively with their AoE bombs. And then a Hellpit Abomination, which could potentially be pretty dangerous to some of my larger units. Definitely the large units such as the Trolls or the Chaos Spawn. In the back, my opponent does have a whole bunch of Night Runners with slings, who of course are rather mobile, can cause quite a bit of hurt, and could definitely be a bit of a nuisance. So as things are starting off, I'm being a little cheeky here, pushing Kolek as close as I can, and then trying to bait my opponent to make a move. He pushes his Hellpit Abomination out, and I do countercharge with Kolek, though of course it does have a regen, so any damage I do, well, it's great if I get any early damage, is good. Is going to be somewhat, just slightly ineffective. Obviously, it can just recover potentially in the long run. You can see Kolek does get peppered down a little bit by some rocks from the Skaven Slingers, but I'm not too concerned. It's okay, and we're basically just setting up for a massive charge. And you can see I'm starting to push units in, sending the Marauders to try to bust through the Skaven Slaves quickly, and of course the Chaos Warriors will trade rather effectively with Stormvermin. Stormvermin actually doesn't have much better stats, if at all better stats than Chaos Warriors. You can see 34 melee attack, 44 melee defense, and 36 melee and 36 weapon strength. To the Stormvermin's 36, 44, but that's with strength in numbers, and 34 weapon strength. So actually, Stormvermin are weaker on a per model basis. The only thing they really have going against Chaos Warriors is that they do have slightly more HP because there's more of them. But honestly, this is one of the big problems with Stormvermin, is that Stormvermin effectively have the stats of units that are several hundred points cheaper than them. In this situation, Chaos Warriors are honestly cheaper than Stormvermin. They're cheaper than Stormvermin by, I do believe, 300 points. And their stats are very, very comparable, which is rather unfortunate. And in fact, in some ways, the Chaos Warriors are definitely superior. Over here, you can see my opponent is trying to whittle down Kolek, definitely dropping in that splash damage from the Death Globe Bombardiers, and definitely causing some nasty hurt. But in my favor, Kolek, alongside the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, are beating down on the Hellpit Abomination. You can see on all the other flanks, we are getting a nice little Lord of the Storm here on the Stormvermin. You can see the Chaos Trolls with armor are definitely laying the smackdown on these guys, and doing quite a bit of work. The Chaos Trolls are very, very potent. They actually have very good melee stats. The main problem is their leadership, but as long as they are not being kind of beaten down and shot down by enemy ranged fire, they'll do okay. In the meantime, here you can see the Forsaken have snuck into the back into the cookie jar, and on the flank, these Forsaken are finishing up this poor Warp Fire Thrower that they caught out on the side. Meantime, my opponent is finally getting this Warp Fire Thrower out into position, but unfortunately the Warp Fire Thrower is rather slow, and you can see I'm not entirely sure why my opponent just forgot about these Skaven Slaves, but they are just sitting there in the woods doing very, very little, or actually nothing. Over here, Kolek alongside the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth are beating down the Hellpit Abomination. The Hellpit Abomination lacks melee stats. It's very, very tanky, is its main kind of selling point. But its actual melee stats are somewhat pitiful, and it's definitely not the most reliable sort of counter to single large models like this. It tends to do very well against cavalry or units like Chaos Spawn. Over here you can see the Chaos Spawn are definitely getting beaten down pretty badly. They're not great against armor. They don't have armor piercing, so they're not the most amazing against Stormvermin with sword and shields. And obviously they're getting peppered down a lot by the slings. In the back line, though, you can see the Forsaken are just doing some brutal work, tearing through Stormvermin, tearing through Death Globe Bombardiers, and now getting into the cookie jar against Night Runners. These guys are just tearing through the enemy really greatly. Even without their frenzy, they're disgustingly powerful. Over here, this unit of Chaos Marauders is tying down the poor Warlock Engineer, who's not particularly well equipped to fight them. They're not particularly great at killing him either, but it doesn't matter. It's definitely a kind of even trade here, since the Warlock Engineer is rather cheap in this sort of configuration. Over here you can see some Skaven Slaves are coming back, but they're not going to be too much of an influence. And you can see in the meantime the Forsaken are coming in, and Forsaken against Night Runners are just nasty stuff. Forsaken are one of the best infantry in the game in some ways as well. I definitely, if for Chaos, I would argue that Forsaken are possibly one of the best. And you can see that here we do get end game, unfortunately, as I'm zooming in on the Forsaken. But as far as Chaos is concerned, I would argue that Forsaken are probably the best infantry they have available. And Chaos actually does have quite a few different infantry that is really cost effective and good. Chaos Warriors with great weapons, they have Marauders with great weapons, and then they have Forsaken, and I think that's really kind of the trifecta of super cost effective Chaos infantry. But definitely, they did some great work there. Looking at the stats here, the cast rolls with armor are actually not bad against units like Stormvermin, and I figured that with their 110 armor, they'd actually be able to trade pretty effectively with Plague Monks and that sort of stuff if needed. The Chaos Spawn did not perform that well, and this was obviously a risky pick, and against this much Night Runner fire, they just were not that effective. Chaos Spawn are a very situational unit, and in general, I would not recommend them, but I wanted to try them out for fun, and they were. Apologies there. They were definitely rather amusing. Just to see him take the field. Kolek, of course, a beast as always, as was the Dragon Ogre Shack. I think you can see some of the Chaos Marauders did some major work as well. Aspiring Champions, nothing much to say there. Chaos Warriors are rather effective, and definitely this is one of the big problems with Stormvermin, is that Stormvermin is simply not cost efficient. If I was to make, there's actually quite a few critiques I would make of my opponent's build. I mostly just wanted to demonstrate to you guys that a game where I used Chaos Spawn and Trolls and Chaos Warriors, like units you don't really see very often in sync. But if I was to critique my opponent's build, definitely a few mistakes here. I think I think that the Warp Fire Throw is not really the greatest pick against Chaos, which tends to have a lot of armor. The Helped Abomination is very situational. It's not something you want to rely on to duel enemy single model large targets. And this was a mistake I made when the game first, or when Warhammer 2 first came out. I kind of thought the Helped Abomination was going to counter enemy single model large effectively, but it really doesn't do that. It does rather well against the monstrous infantry or cavalry or that sort of stuff. For example, it does rather well against demigryphs with halberds amongst other things. Finally, the Stormvermin shields are the Stormvermin Throne shield are really iffy and somewhat subpar infantry in it. They are still susceptible to fear and terror in all situations. They don't even have frenzy, so they always, like the Plague Monks do, so they're never immune to that sort of stuff. Their HP pool per model is pitiful, which means that despite having 120 models, which might seem really impressive, these guys actually barely have more HP than Chaos Warriors. And Chaos Warriors have 75 models, so the per model HP on Chaos Warriors is much higher. Obviously, this does make the Stormvermin a little less susceptible to having models sniped by artillery or something like that, but at the same time, it does mean that they can, in just a straight up fight, their models are going to get, they're not going to have that much of a benefit. I definitely think Stormvermin are one of the most overpriced units, and I really do believe they need to go down in price by a couple hundred gold at least, which is rather unfortunate. Otherwise, I don't think this build is necessarily that bad. I definitely think the Stormvermin should be dropped in favor of some better heavy hitters there, and the Warfire Thrower in favor of some sort of AP. But otherwise, this is definitely, I think, a bias. The rest of this, the filler sort of units and the supporting units, I definitely think is workable. Even the Helped Abomination is workable. It's just something to keep you aware of. Even Queek is not that terrible. I know Queek is not in favor compared to Skrulk, but he's definitely not bad. Regardless, this was mostly a demonstration match just to show a game with Chaos Spawn and some of these silly units. So I do hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing it. Good game to Gazwaz41 here. As usual, guys, I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about the game, anything like that, be sure to post them down as well. And I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.